Hey y'all, it's Troy, and something kind of spurred me today to do this particular video for a couple of reasons. Number one, this was my pen of the day. This is an Esterbrook LJ. It's a vintage fountain pen. And Esterbrook had been around for a long time, and I think they went out of business sometime in the 1950s or so, if memory serves. You can get a whole lot more history on Esterbrook's. I'm not an Esterbrook historian, but I am an Esterbrook lover, and there's a couple of reasons for that, and I'll share that with you. I've had somewhere around 13, 14 Esterbrooks that I've bought over the past year or so, and I've been into being able to enjoy them, play with them, refurbish them somewhat. I've given some away. I use some in Esterbrook at least once a day. Matter of fact, on my desk, I keep this right here. This is the Esterbrook. They call it the 8-ball because of how it looks, and that is just a desk set, sort of like you'd find at a bank kind of thing. And that's a fountain pen that sits here, and it's inked 24/7, and I use it all the time. Now, I still keep my pen of the day on my desk as well, and I tend to use them on a regular basis, and I rotate these through. And, you know, I like vintage pens. I like new pens. I wanted to branch out a little bit from just buying the new stuff, and I wanted to see what some of the older stuff. So I did a little research, and I ran across Esterbrook's. I just kind of stumbled upon them, and I really enjoyed them. What I found is I could fix them. And the reason I could fix them is because I ran across some other pens that I knew nothing about lever-filled pens, except the Three Stooges had a couple of episodes that had lever-filled pens. So, you know, I purchased a Schaefer Imperial that I have been fighting with ever since I got it. I'll get it writing for a while, it'll stop writing, it'll write for a while, it'll stop writing. Right now it's in my to-fix bin because I had it writing great and it stopped writing. So I figured, let me try some others, and I found Esterbrook's. And the first ones I bought were sort of like this. I tend to get the J series. The J series comprise pretty much of the Esterbrook J, which this is, and this one looks a whole lot better than it did when I first got it. It's all polished up nicely compared to what it was, and I got a lot of the oxidation off from it and got it writing fairly nicely. And then you've got the LJ. Now the LJ series are a little smaller, and I've given away, I think, all my LJs that had the clips on them. One of the problems with LJs, because they're a little smaller, is the clips tend to break off from them. So you see you got the clip here on this nice little copper version, but this gray one and the blue one, the clips are broken off. I do believe I gave my wife a blue LJ that she's got. My son's got, I think, a black one, or my mother-in-law's got a black one. I think I gave a gray J series to my, let's see, a gray one to my son, a black one to my mother-in-law kind of thing. And I sent another J series gray one to a friend of mine. So let me give you the comparison. You see they're one's a little smaller than the other. This one's a little skinnier than this one. They both got the jewel top. They both have the jewel on the bottom. So one of the things when you're looking for an Esterbrook, you may want to look to make sure it's got the jewel, because another thing is these things tend to get chipped right here on the top. Usually on the top, not as much so on the bottom. At least that's my experience. I find these all over. You can find these on eBay. I see people paying $40 or $50, $60 for one of these on eBay. In my opinion, if you pay $15 or more, you probably paid too much. I don't think I've paid over $15 for a single Esterbrook that I've had, supposedly some in really good condition. I picked this one up at an antique shop. Clip was broken. Because I just won one for $10, I offered him 10 and he took it. So you can find them at a decent price. I've lost a lot of auctions on eBay because I'm not going to overpay for them. Recently I picked up an Esterbrook Transitional, still part of the J series. It looks very similar to the others, and disregard this because this was just something that was thrown on there by the guy apparently who allegedly reconditioned this and sold it to me. I don't think he did a great job because I don't have a really good looking jewel on the top. There's no cap on it. I mean, there's no clip on it, so that's missing. He just, I look at this thing and there's nothing on there that says Esterbrook, anything about it, so I don't know where this little thing came from. But so it came and it wrote not so good. and I worked on it, and I'll get to that here in a minute. But one of the things about this you'll find, though, on the transitions, one way you can really tell is it's always got a flat bottom rather than having a nice little jewel. If you see the bottom, the LJ and the flat bottom of the transition. I don't mind that. Actually, I kind of like the flat bottom of the transition a little better. Keep in mind, if you're going to look at Esterbrook pens and you want to collect them, you'll want to remember that these pens go back to the 1940s, maybe the 30s, 50s, anywhere in there. So they're old. There's a few things that you'll want to have for supplies if you want to collect any Esterbrooks, and you'll want to do a little bit of research. Now, Richard Binder has some stuff on how to change sacks on lever filler pens. There are some videos on YouTube where people show you specifically, even with an Esterbrook, how to change a sack. Esterbrook.net is a pretty good resource. Brian Anderson of Anderson Pens used to really collect Esterbrooks, and so he put together Esterbrook.net as a resource page. Not to be confused with like Esterbrook.com, which is totally separate. But you want to get yourself some ink sacks. One of the things about these lever fillers is they use what is called a sack, and all it is a latex or rubber bladder. And this goes on a section. Now, what I'm going to do is show you some of the stuff that I've got from my Esterbrook bag o' tricks or bag of supplies, because I dug into it today. Matter of fact, I have over here, probably in my little container where I put stuff drying, another nib that I actually took off from that transition Esterbrook. Nibs, when they're new in a box, they come in little boxes like this. What I love about Esterbrooks, the old ones, is that they've got nibs that come in a kind of like modern Viscontis. They've got the basically it's a modular thing. You just screw it in and you screw it out. This is the section. This nib just goes in here and screws in place. This rubber sack will be cut to length and will be glued, essentially, or cemented with shellac over that nipple on the back end. So what you're going to have is essentially that is your ink system for your pen. And there will be a lever like this that you'll pull out, and there is a little bar inside that will compress that rubber sack and suck ink in. Now, when I said be careful, keep in mind that they're very old. Yeah, I've broken 2 of these suckers so far. One, in trying to get one of these out of the barrel. Now, this goes down inside this barrel. And that's not how I broke this one, by the way. I broke this one after I'd gotten this out and I was polishing this up. Turns out, on this particular model, they're so thin walled on this particular barrel, I cracked it without hardly putting any pressure on it whatsoever. So even though I've been able to do it on other pens and other Esterbrook models and other pens that I own of different brands, being able to polish it up without having to keep that in, apparently with this you got to. But I've got a fistful of these little things, these little nibs. And one of the things I loved about Esterbrook is they had a ton of nibs to choose from. I've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got about 8 of these little nibs, 9 of these nibs just rolling around here on my desk. So if I don't like what I've got, I can always put in a different one. If I don't like the fine that it came with, which quite honestly I did not like with this, I changed it and I put in a medium nib instead. I've got a spreadsheet, and on Esterbrook.net you'll see a whole listing of all what the different numbers mean. You'll need a good magnifying glass, but when you look at these, You probably can't see that at all, but there's a number on these nibs that tells you what they are. So, and you just look at the list and you'll see that this one is a firm fine, or this was a fine medium, or this one's for Greg's shorthand writing, that kind of thing. And that's really, really helpful. I found a few that are fine that write very well. I tend to like medium nibs over fine nibs, and that's one of the things I ran across with the one that I use today. I got this for a few weeks and I'd never inked it up. So I went ahead and broke out some ink that I wanted to try, and so some Pilot Iroshizuku, and I went ahead and filled it up with something that I would not normally use, with kind of a green. It had a 2556 firm fine nib on it. I did a lot of smoothing on it because it was really, really tough. It was scratchy, and I worked at it and it came out okay. But the Pilot Iroshizuku Chiku Rin, CHIKU-Rin is what I used. So I went ahead and changed it out today, just on a whim. I had a few down moments at work. So for my lunch break, sometimes I'll fiddle with my pens. So I used that pen and I put in a 1551 firm medium nib. It writes much better than that firm fine did, the 2556 nib that was in it, but it could still use a little work. So I spent a little bit of time smoothing, and this is what that ink looks like. It's a light green, kind of a pale light green, and you may not be able to tell the difference, but I sure could in writing that between this and this. It was smoother, and so now it writes very nicely. So just as with other pens with Esterbrook nibs, they may still need a little bit of work. Let me dispel a few things. The modern day incarnation of Esterbrook is nothing, absolutely nothing, like the old glorious American-made, reliable as the day is long Esterbrook J series pens. I've read several reviews, watched several video reviews, and even had similar experiences on my own where the new Esterbrooks are nothing at all like the old. This was a new one. Beautiful pen. You may have seen it on one of my previous episodes. A Charles Schulz limited edition. Why is it Charles Schulz? Because Charles Schulz, who did the comic strip Peanuts, was notorious for using a nice Esterbrook fountain pen to pen his cartoon Peanuts. You may not have known that. So they came out with a commemorative fountain pen in his honor. Black and yellow. Reminds me of Charlie Brown, which I'm pretty sure was the idea. They had another one that was white and black, reminiscent of Snoopy. Well, I kind of like this one because I didn't have any yellow pins. Just like with regular ones, they unscrew. This one is a bit fatter, which is good. I've had nothing but problems with this. I put in 3 separate nibs. I have a Nemesine nib in here and a different feed than I had in here, and I still don't know why it gives me such a hard time. It's got hard starts. I will set this down, pick it up the next day, and I got to write with it, scribble with it in order to get ink flow. Once the ink flows, though, it writes fairly well, but it's done that on 3 separate nibs, 2 separate feeds. I'm kind of frustrated with it. Just out of curiosity, I wanted to see if a Jinhao 450 feed would fit in this. Fits perfect. The number 6 standard nib from Jinhao pens works in here. The Nemesine nib works in here. The Bach or Yovo nib, whatever one happens to be that it came with, that fits in here, and that fits in a Jinhao 450 perfectly. So, you can interswap the nibs with it, but I'm a little frustrated because, to me, they've tarnished the name of Esterbrook. I've been very hesitant to buy any, having seen all of the reviews, went ahead and took the chance, and pretty much wasted $65 on a modern-day Esterbrook. So, I love my Esterbrook pens. I've got a family of them. The family grows. Every so often I get a wild hair and go, yeah, maybe I'll add another Esterbrook. When I go to a pen show, or even on eBay, I'll be picking up some nibs once in a while. You know, nibs are not expensive. Depends on who you get them from, though. I've seen people selling these nibs for more than the pen is worth, just the nib itself. You can always get the style nib that you want. So when you go searching for them, it's kind of funny because I printed out a spreadsheet of all the Esterbrook nibs, and I was at a pen show and I whipped out the list. I had checked off which ones I wanted to buy. A guy had an old cigar box full of all these little nibs, and I'm going through them and looking at them and okay, I wanted one of these, I wanted one of these, and so I picked up several nibs that way. They're made in America. They're good quality pens. They're fun to try to restore. If you ever want to get into fountain pen restoration, to tinker with it, to play with it, to cut your teeth on it a little bit, Esterbrook's are great for that. It's hard to screw up a good quality Esterbrook. Obviously, if it's, you know, a cheaper constructed, probably the later model Esterbrook's like this one, a little easier to mess that one up. But the earlier ones in the 30s and 40s especially, those are fairly rugged. They're hard to crack, hard to break. Not that I haven't done it, because I've done it on an old green, actually an LJ. That's a cap left over from it. This is the kind of cap that goes on those newer ones. And it's kind of funny because I was reading that these caps were prone to break, even though this one's metal. And this is, the barrel here is just a cheap plastic. Go figure. But I do like the fact they're interchangeable. This desk set here is a great example. The section that was in that sucker, you may not be able to see it, but it's a little warped. It's a little out of round. So it was a little tough getting out. So I had to use a heat gun and I got it out. And it just so happens that this one that I broke here, I was able to use that section and put it in here. Didn't like the nib that came with this one, so I put a different nib in it, and it writes perfect. It is a beautiful writer. That's why this one I made sure wrote well, because it sits on my desk every single day. Esterbrook's, the J series, J, LJ, J Transition series pens. Great pens if you're just getting into the hobby and you're looking to collect and get a bunch of them. Like I said, I bought some 14 of them over the past year or so, and I've fixed a good many of them. I've had to buy ink sacks more than once, and I typically buy them half a dozen at a time. I think this is my third bag of them that I've got right here that I've purchased of them. So it's worth getting into if you're willing to take the time to learn. If you want to hone your skills a little bit, you want something to play with and have a sense of accomplishment. If you just like old pens and can appreciate what people wrote with in the 40s, 50s, I highly recommend old Esterbrook. And I don't even like lever filler pens, quite honestly. I just don't, but I like Esterbrook's for some reason. I don't know why. I just do. But if you want to learn about them, I have found no better way than to play with an Esterbrook.